some elbow room here.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of the Troutdale Budget Committee. This is a work session for the City of Troutdale Budget Committee and Urban Renewal Agency Budget Committee for the City of Troutdale. This time, can we have a roll call, please?
Sure. Mayor Ritler?
Here.
Councilor Andrews? Councilor Allen?
Here.
Councilor One?
Present.
Councilor White?
Here.
Councilor Davidson?
Here.
Councilor Leamy?
Here.
Tanny Stephenson?
Here.
Jean Bent?
Here.
Heidi Timmerman?
Here.
Sandy Glantz?
Present.
Paul Wilcox?
Here.
Victoria Rizzo?
Here.
And Kevin Minkoff.
Here.
All right, we have a quorum. I want to thank everybody for taking the time to be here this evening, and we'll go to the first order of business, which is nominations for Budget Committee Chair and Vice Chair. And this will be from December 2nd, 2025 through June 30th, 2026.
Well, I nominate Tammy Stephenson for chair.
I'll second.
Okay, right. We're taking nominations for chair. We have one. Other nominations for Budget Committee Chair.
This is Paul Wilcox. I'd like to nominate Jean Bent.
Okay. Are there any other nominations for Budget Committee Chair?
I don't know if you heard Sandy second it.
I did.
Okay.
Okay. I don't know that officially we need a second on these anymore. All right. And if there's no more nominations for chair,
I move nominations be closed.
okay.
How about that?
Second.
All right, we have a motion second to close nominations for Budget Committee Chair. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, those are closed. And now we'll vote on those. I guess we'll start out, we take them in the order that they came in.
I think so. I think that's how we did it before. We went around and if it's eliminated, then we go to the second person.
Okay, we'll go ahead with the first slate.
Okay, this is to vote in for Tanny Stephenson as chair. Tanny Stephenson.
I'd like to go first.
Okay. Mayor Ritler.
Yes.
Jean Bent.
Yes.
Councilor Andrews. Oh, that's right. He's not here. Sorry.
Yes, I'm here.
Perfect. Heidi Timmerman.
Yes.
Councilor Allen.
Yes.
Sandy Glantz.
Yes.
Councilor One.
Yes.
Paul Wilcox.
No.
Councilor White.
Yes.
Victoria Rizzo.
Yes.
Councilor Davidson.
Yes.
Kevin Minkoff.
Yes.
Councilor Levy.
Yes.
And Tanny Stephenson.
Yes.
Okay, that passes.
Right. At this time, we'll take nominations for Vice Chair for the Budget Committee.
I nominate
Mayor Ritler.
Victoria Rizzo.
Okay.
Second.
We have Victoria Rizzo, and are there any other nominations for Vice Chair for the Budget Committee for this year?
Yeah, can I nominate Sandy Glantz?
Yes, you may.
This is Paul Wilcox. I'd like to nominate Kevin Minkoff.
I decline. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Okay, and yes, Kevin declined that. So other nominations for Vice Chair, please?
Nominations be closed.
Second.
And we have a nomination, a second to close nominations for Vice Chair. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, that's closed, and then we will take the slate, please.
Okay, and this is for Victoria Rizzo for vice chair. Mayor Ritler.
Yes.
Jean Bent.
No.
Councilor Andrews.
No.
Heidi Timmerman.
No.
Councilor Allen.
No.
Sandy Glantz.
No.
Counselor One,
No.
Paul Wilcox,
No.
Counselor White,
Yes.
Victoria Rizzo,
No.
Counselor Davidson,
No.
Kevin Minkoff,
No.
Counselor Leamy,
No.
and Tanya Stephenson.
No. So that would, or two, the other candidate. Okay. All right, thank you. And with that, we will move.
So he had just texted me that, like the other day when he was like in the hallway or whatever. And he texted me today, he's like, the next month I'm gonna get to really know the posters out here.
Somebody's
There's like posters on the wall outside the office,
You're not muted, by the way.
Okay, sorry, Mel. I'm trying to log into Dad's and it's just not letting me now.
hang up.
Sorry, I'm trying to. It won't let me rename it. Is it because he's on already?
He might be.
There we go, I couldn't find it. Yep, got it, sorry.
So do we need to do a vote for Sandy or
Yeah.
The other candidate, yes. So just a point of order, then Sandy will be the vice chair.
Yes.
Because Victoria lost the vote. And Sandy was nominated. Fine, that's good.
So moving forward, I'll just give just a quick brief update on where we're at. I think the big things that we're looking at predominantly have to do with our contract services with Multnomah County Sheriff's Department and Gresham Fire. Right now, we've entered into a 5-year agreement with Gresham Fire at a 7.3% increase per year off of where we're currently at, which was the agreement that was signed last year. So it's not the end-all, save-all solution. It does still increase more than what we'll see our general fund revenues increase. But it is sustainable for the short term until we can figure out what our long-term solution is. The agreement that was reached with Multnomah County Sheriff's Office prior to my undertaking this position is a 3-year agreement. And we'll need to kind of assess over the next 3 years on how we deal with that and what we do in the future. But with that, that's my update on where we're sitting. We have a fire task force that's meeting next Wednesday, and we, as necessary, to try to get to the bottom of what's in the best interest of all 4 cities moving forward for fire services. Yes, as you mentioned.
We have a 5-year contract. Is that uncancelable?
No, it has a 12-year notice for cancellation, or no, 12-month off-ramp, if you will. So it has an exit clause by written notice, any party can leave the agreement. It's between the 4 cities, Troutdale, Fairview, Wood Village, and City of Gresham. Yes, sir.
Is that 7.3 just for the first year?
Every year.
Every year, 7.3%? And with, do you have numbers on the 3-year sheriff?
3-year share on like what the numbers look like every year.
No, to start with, a 3-year agreement, you said 5
Yeah,
years.
so right now we're at 3.25. I think this is last year. Next year will go up to about 3.427, if I'm not mistaken. So it's about an increase of 250,000 per year. I'm going off of memory, but it ends in like 4 point.
We've got a slide for you a little later.
Oh, okay.
You'll see it escalate, but yeah, it starts hurting after long.
And how close was it compared to where we were at, Tanny, at the budget meeting in April?
I'll get into that in just a sec.
Okay.
Good. I don't have
Well, I want to thank you for putting your faith in me to lead this committee this year. I will do my best, and it's a little hard with 14 of us, so please get my attention as best you can. You can throw something if you need to. Won't be offended. Raise your hand if you're online. And if I don't see you, you can put your nameplate up. There's other things you can do, but please make sure that all your questions get answered. It's very important, and there's no question that is too dumb for this group. And, you know, as we know, we've got a pretty good task ahead of us, and we're looking at costs for fire, we're looking at police, we're looking at a lot of things, and I want to do a quick shout out because, you know, the committee that's been working behind the scenes has actually done more than you think to get some of these costs in line. They're very significant, but they're less than what they would have been, believe me, by quite a bit. You look at just the last 5 years, right? Our increase for police and fire have gone up 4.4 million. And we're going to see another increase coming up of another $1.4 million, basically. And like I said, it's better than it was, but it's still pretty significant. And although our taxes are going up, you know, more than 3%, it's still not enough to make up for that shortfall. And so that's something that, you know, we're going to have to address probably in a number of different ways. But, you know, we're going to be held accountable for the work that we do. We're going to be held accountable for the services that we provide to the citizens. And, you know, whether there's a district or not a district or how this whole thing works out, end of the day, it's going to be what we do and how we do it. I really want to just thank everybody for their time and their service. I want to thank you in advance for all the time that you're going to put in going through the budget book. Because that thing is a real beast and it takes a lot to put it together. But I think we'll be better, you know, as we go along, the more research that we've done behind times. And so with that, we'll get into tonight's agenda, which is going to be the technical piece of it. And then we're going to get to take a look at how we're doing so far this year. And I'll turn it over to Mr. Newman.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. My screen thing to switch, I hope. Maybe. There we go. Okay, we covered that. So tonight, inform, update, answer questions, quick glance at last year, take a look into the coming year, and get you thinking for April of next year. So ground rules, local budget law goes on for pages and pages, as I've mentioned before. Lots of rules, requirements, details, etc. But most all of it is related to what we think of as the official budget meetings in April, when the committee is actually considering a proposed budget, deliberating, making changes, approving a budget, and moving it on to the council. This is what's considered as a work session, so there are no decisions tonight. It's just informational. But there are also, because of that, there's also limitations on what the budget committee can do, etc. You can have general discussions on organization, fund structure, visions, goals, etc. But what you can't do is make determinations, make judgments, specific estimates about different programs or expenditures, saying that you want to move this dollar amount of money from this budget to that budget. Those types of things we can't do in this off-season meeting. So tonight you can discuss the issues in general, relative priorities, you know, you want to spend more money on the water park next year and less money on the golf course in general, but not specifically about what you might want to spend in either of those areas. Again, and then of course potential future issues you can discuss. So any questions about the ground rules? It's the same boring thing you've heard me say every year at the mid-year meeting. So anyway, financial overview. It's particularly this time of the year with me wrestling with the auditors, trying to get the audit completed. We're reporting on last year. We're in mid-year of the current year, monitoring, implementing, and we're starting the budget planning process for next year. So last year turned out fine. This year, so far, so good. There have been some more impacts and continuing issues about the economy. So quickly, how did last year turn out? There's a handout at your place. It's the same document that I prepare every year, same format. Addresses sort of how last year turned out. The revenue minus expense is what's compared over on the far side, not the revenue or not the budget performance, but the actual difference. And you'll see that for the general fund number at the top there. You'll see that when we get to the fund balance slide here in a moment. But it's just the kind of report on how last year turned out. Thankfully, we didn't violate the budget caps on any of the expenditure side. And by and large, we came in where we had expected, generally. So last year, overall, you know, we have to plan things, you know, in April, and we're projecting things going out 18 months to June of the following year. So we budget, then we do a revised projection when we're doing the next year's budget, and then of course we get to an actual. So we had 108,000, you know, in overall revenues, what was originally. We have the 3.4 under in expenditures, and that of course includes the contingency that is part of the appropriations, that is some of which is transferred council resolution each year. And then we have the net, so that shows you that 1.5 million reduction that we had on the previous page. And then that was the previous was the operating. This is looking at the fund balance. Again, this the actual column there. The start of the year at 10.3. Revenues, expenditures, etc. We got down, we have an ending fund balance for June 30, 2025 of the 8.796. And again, that same operating net of the 1.5. So it ties into that the side of the document that said last year. So that's the quick snapshot about how last year turned out and where we ended up with the fund balance. Again, just on the general fund balance. And then that's our graph. We'll get to further years out later when we get to projecting the future. So it's customary on that. So this year, the fiscal year that started a few months ago on July 1st, that's the flip side of the document, the little snapshot icon, just to say that it's only partway through the year. You know, it's the numbers are changing day by day. I prepared this over the weekend, and of course Debbie was entering invoices yesterday and today, and so these numbers have already changed. But you know, it's constantly moving in the year. This is again 33% of the year through. The big deficit that we always see on the top line in the general fund, again, is because we have that ending fund, unappropriated ending fund balance that we carry over from June 30 to July 1st to provide for the funding of expenses from July 1st till property taxes start coming in November. So we don't yet see any benefit of the property taxes there. Some of the other funds, their capital project funds, they had projects that there was expenses on. The operating funds, the utility funds tend to have a more regularized set of revenues and expenditures. So property taxes, as I mentioned, that was the Amazon impact. We had a little carryover of Amazon impact because their implementation, they had essentially 2 different schedules on their enterprise zone. So most of it rolled off the prior year, a little bit of it rolled off last year, which is what bumped the number up a little bit for us. So that's sort of how property taxes have been. Past years I'd been asked how the revenues were coming in, particularly when it was related to COVID. So this is just sort of the ongoing graph of the property taxes. Transient lodging tax was another question that I get now. Of course, it's just through October, so it's really wanting to look at the recovery from COVID, and it's been bumping along there. The through October just represents 1 quarter's results. They only file quarterly, so no surprise that it's where that is. Same thing, county business income tax early in the cycle. This is the chart that comes from the county economist and part of what they provide each month. And so it's starting out well. They did note that they got an exceptionally large payment early on, so that's going to distort it a little bit. I expect that red line, which is the current year, to come back down toward the rest of the group, but it's certainly better than being on the downside of it. Gas tax was another area I get questions about, and again, same type of thing, recovery from COVID, bouncing along there. That little dip in 23, 24, and bump in 24, 25 on the orange gas one. The state ODOT got a bit behind there, so I believe part of the revenue didn't get picked up, didn't get reported and issued to us. So really you have to look at those 2 years together. That line pretty well flattens out then. And again, same thing, we're only partway into the year, and this has an additional lag to it. All the retailers, the wholesalers, it's all have to go through the report and or through the month, and they have like 20 days to then file, and then ODOT has to reconcile, and so we're generally getting, it's 60 days out plus before we're getting the results, so that's only part of it. So questions on last year and so far where we are this year in terms of snapshots?
I do.
Go ahead. Mr. Minkoff?
Thank you. I'm just trying to I'm comparing the budget numbers last year through June 30, 2025. So that's the 24-25 year. And these budget numbers don't match the budget that was presented as finalized, the council adopted budget for 24-25. So for example, if I look at expense budget for the general fund of $20,300,000, and I go back to the council adopted budget for that year, it says $23,998,657. And every number is different from what I see was the council adopted budget as was presented last year.
I guess I'm not sure which pages you're looking at, but each year there are mid-year budget adjustments that occur, so the budget that gets adopted in June of each year for the coming fiscal year rarely is, well, on a lot of the funds there's no change, but on the general fund, rarely would we have a year where there's no change in that adopted budget before we get to the end of the year. So the ultimate final budget for that year is different than what it was when it was originally adopted in the prior June. And the council is the one that makes those changes. The staff brings the information, and those changes can only be made by council, but it's done by a subsequent council resolution. Sometimes it's just a budget transfer, sometimes there's a more formal supplemental budget process that's necessary. It sort of depends on some of the particulars and this magnitude and some of those other pieces.
Is there a summary of those changes?
Well, there's a resolution that outlines what the changes are when the council adopts them. If we have more than one of those a year, there's not one document that summarizes both of them, but most years we just have one. Usually every 3 years we have two, because we have the labor agreement that rarely gets, in fact, I don't think it's, in my experience, has never been done before the end of the budget adoption cycle. So it's typically, it gets adopted in the fall, and then there's the sort of the, I want to say, routine one that we do every year. So in those years, we generally have two, but 2 out of the 3 years, we generally have one. Again, unless there's something special that comes up, new event, sometimes there's a need to do something. I forget, we had a couple years ago where we needed to do something mid-year for the Urban Renewal Agency, and so there was a separate one. So.
Okay, thank you.
Sandy Glanz?
I have 2 questions. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I thought there was a question where the state didn't want any kind of gas tax going to local municipalities. Am I just imagining that, or was that a long time ago, or?
Well, there was, a number of years ago, there was some changes to the legislation, and they put in additional requirements requiring voter approval. And so that was the process that we had to go through to get our local gas tax implemented. I think that was a little bit easier for a municipality to implement one, but they put up some additional hoops to jump.
And the second question is, where didn't we have a recent increase on the water bill, and where does that money go to?
Recent increase in the water bill, you're talking about the police and fire services fee?
I just recall that I know that my water bill went up.
Well, yeah, your utility bill, which has got water, sewer, stormwater, and the police and fire fee all on the same invoice.
Okay, so that's what it was police and fire?
Yeah, that's the $15 fee that was implemented in this year's budget. The utility rates also went up. There was an incremental increase in those commodity rates, as they're referred to, so.
Okay, thank you.
It was that 8%.
I think it was 8 for all 3, if I remember correctly.
Questions?
Okay. Okay, so quick, the economy is thriving. Why are Americans feeling so sour about it? And of course, the word is affordability. Quite a number of different articles recently in the press and financial trade press over the economy and the sentiments, but from cross currents of economic indicators, we got the Federal Reserve rate increases coming, tariffs, housing, employment, inflation, consumers, and recession. So from the state economist's most recent presentation, it's talking about how, in general, there are positives in the economy. Again, going back to that quote of the economy is in positive shape, but people are sour. You know, GDP is continuing to be positive rather than negative. It is slowing. Inflation is less severe, but it is picking up. Unemployment is relatively flat. GDP forecast is for it to start to inch back up again. It has been slowing down. We'll have to wait and see. The tariff tornado from April, whether you call it a tax, a fee, a custom, a surcharge, a premium, an assessment, whatever label you put on it, it's a cost increase when you say something is going to have a 20% tariff on it. It's paid along the supply chain, exporter, importer, wholesaler, retailer, the consumer, where along that supply chain shifts among the parties over time and by the type of item. The best study I've found on it indicates that it's about $1,200 additional cost for a year for the quote average consumer. How exactly they determine who's average, I don't know. Their estimate is about $1,600 for next year. But regardless of who's paying which piece or what share of that additional cost it contributes toward inflation. And it isn't to be any kind of a political commentary one way or the other, it's just mathematical, and it's just part of the current economic environment. Housing index is not good. It's not been good for a while. The mortgage rates, those of you that were fortunate enough to do your refinances back there in the 2019 through 2021 period, have those wonderful 3% mortgages. They're in the 6% plus range now. They're inching down a little bit, but not very quickly. Part of the problem is because of affordability and because of the mortgage rates, there's a number of cities across the country where they're actually seeing year-over-year price drops. The index, the year-over-year increase is, as you can see, trending downward. And the home price index, again, dipping back down. Part of the real estate market has been characterized as in pause or frozen or whatever because of affordability. Folks that want to buy can't quite afford it. Folks that have those 3% mortgages feel like they sort of have golden handcuffs. They don't really want to sell and buy a new place with a 6% mortgage. Folks are remembering the higher prices of a couple of years ago, so that if they are trying to sell, they don't really want to lower the price enough for somebody to buy, and so there's a surge in what they're referring to as delistings. So the volume of activity is declining. It's, again, whether you call it freeze or pause or whatever. Troutdale is barely positive over the past year. As you can see, it's pretty flat. Certainly better than those cities that were having price declines. In any case, affordability is largely what's kind of, and the mortgage rates are kind of what's keeping that in a pause state. Employment, awfully busy graph. The point being is that it's softening, but it's not crashing from the state economist. Again, the unemployment rate, the hiring pace is still positive, but it's declining, getting slower and slower. Unemployment rate is ticking upward, but it's not spiking. It's still in what they consider a healthy range. Inflation trend, again, slowly downward. Supply chain uncertainty is less so about COVID, and more so over routing and sourcing and manufacturing locations as it relates to tariff compliance. And then the federal budget and policy changes are also affecting the inflation part of the puzzle. Been seeing it certainly come down dramatically from its peak in 2022, but it's starting to tick slightly upward again. It's still above the Fed's target. Again, you can see it had been coming down and starting to inch its way back up. We'll see what happens over the remainder of the fall here. Producer price, CPI, different ways of measuring it, they're all sort of in that same range. Certainly down from the trend. Whether they continue to inch downward or flatten up and start to go up again remains to be seen. As we've talked about before, the CPI is, your personal experience is going to be different than the average because, of course, the largest component is the housing one. So for those folks that are renters that are wanting to sign a new lease, they tend to get hit with the inflation on rent. Those of you that may have a home and a fixed rate mortgage, it's not changing. It's the same as it was last month, the month before. Nevertheless, you are experiencing different aspects of that with the food and beverage component, transportation component, et cetera. So of course it hits the consumer where it's visible and noticeable. Surveys of consumer attitudes, sentiment, future expectation. It's more a survey of consumers rather than a numerical measurement of prices on the shelf. But as you can see, both of them are showing a downward trend in terms of the consumer's view and attitude about both the current condition and the future. Quote out of the most recent consumer sentiment index: consumers remain frustrated about the persistence of high prices and weakening incomes. And again, the other part of it, they report that their personal finances are weighed down at the present state of high prices. It isn't so much that inflation is back at that 9%, but prices are not going back down to where they were 3 years ago, or 4 years ago, 5 years ago. They flattened out, but they flattened out up here rather than going back to where they were. So the inflation rate has largely subsided, but the level of cost is still much higher. Shoppers think about what had been, and it becomes problematic for them. The sentiment, last month's slide, as they were quoting the government shutdown, sticky inflation, slate of the kind of high-profile layoffs combined to make shoppers feel queasy. Now, the preliminary numbers out of Black Friday, Cyber Monday, etc., was the numbers that I saw were a 4.7 increase. I'm sorry, a 4.2 increase, but underlying it was about a 3.7 of that was related to the cost that was greater. So the ticket, individual items, and so there was really a very small increase in the actual sales volume. Most of that increase in that sales number was because the same item cost more. The other part that was a bit worrying out of the preliminary numbers was that there was a large surge in the buy now, pay later financing of a lot of that Black Friday, Cyber Monday buying. So far, the consumer is holding mostly steady. They haven't collapsed, but it's not anywhere as robust as it might appear on the surface. Small business optimism is pessimistic to a degree. They're continuing to be challenged with reduced profits and sales and labor quality issues. And of course, it's affecting their perspective and their output. It's certainly not back down to the pandemic lows, but it's headed toward that direction. So the talk about recession, there's talk about, well, when is that recession going to arrive? What's the impact? There's been talk about the K-shaped economy in particular, right, coming during COVID. It went away for a little while. It's come back. Conversation about how the folks that are more affluent, homeowners, those that maybe have retirement savings and other stock market investments are feeling the wealth effect from that and are able to sustain maybe a greater share of consumer spending, and that the folks on the lower income scale aren't spending as much as they had been. They're economizing more, pulling back. It's affecting the share has shifted. I believe it was the lower income group had 42% pre-pandemic. It's now shifted to 37%. Higher income group is covering more of that consumer spending. One of the cautions is if there's a big stock market correction, that may cause a pullback on that affluent group's spending and have wider impacts for the economy. One of the other noted economists referred to the economy as a frozen economy, that the only thing that was really moving was anything that was the red hot AI sector and anything immediately adjacent to that red hot sector, like construction of AI centers or electric utilities or whatever, but much of the rest of the marketplace was not necessarily declining, but it wasn't growing. It was sort of frozen in place, sort of like what was characterized in the housing sector. And then a different analysis has been that we have actually been in, for the last couple of years, a rolling recession. That different sectors of the economy had gone into recession, but the quote average has been kept in positive because of other sectors. And as that recessionary experience has rolled through, it's created that negative in the consumer sentiment. The K-shaped economy is another part that the state economist sees. It's sort of, as you can see, the purple line in this graph is the lowest income quartile. And coming out of the pandemic, they saw the largest percentage growth in wages. The highest wage earners, the top quartile is the orange one, they were experiencing a lower rate of increase until recently. And so that's how you start to get that's maybe a better show of it, but as you can see, it's now switched and that bottom quartile is not keeping up. And that gets you that K-shaped economy that they talk about, the affordability. Folks that are higher income and have assets, stock market assets, real estate assets are on the upswing, and the folks that don't have those advantages are on the downswing. Part of the current and coming year impact, the OBBBA, the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, if I got that right, the tax package from this year extended most all of the provisions of the 2017 package, put in some new deductions and allowances, many of which are effective for 2025's tax year, so they're going to affect the tax returns in the coming few months that folks begin to file. Change in the SALT provisions, the new senior deduction, the provision for overtime pay, the auto loan interest deductibility, the number of those that they made effective for 2025. Preliminary analysis is it could boost the economy some $200 billion of tax returns that would not have otherwise been there. So that may help with the economic situation in the late first quarter into the second quarter as those tax returns get filed. The other additional estimate was that overall the changes may then have about $150 billion lower tax burden for taxpayers in 2026. Both of those things will contribute toward a better economy. Political economic risks, of course, the existing geopolitical, Gaza, Ukraine, China. The tariffs, what level, the tariff tornado has calmed down to some degree because there's been a lot of trade deals that have been reached with a number of countries bilaterally. The biggest one that's sort of still outstanding, the 800-pound gorilla, is what's going to happen with China, and that continues to go back and forth. But there's still a number of the tariffs that are floating around, but it's much less than it was earlier in the year. Inflation pauses and Fed rate cuts, the betting on what's going to happen next week at the next Fed meeting as well as in January. Budget and government shutdown risks, the current continuing resolution that was as a result of at the end of the record-long government shutdown only funds the government through the end of January. And then we're right back to where we were at October 1. If Congress is able to pass some of the additional appropriations bills, that may, between now and then, that may eliminate some of that disruption, but the current analysis is that it's unlikely that they'll get all of them done. And depending on how the negotiations go, we may be back into another standoff into the spring, which will also not be good for tax filing season. And then, of course, the 2026 elections, all of that contribute to uncertainty. So, economic summary, the economic outlook is a bit foggy. And of course, the famous Jerome Powell quote from a few weeks ago, what do you do when you're driving your car? Just slow down. So that's may cause the Federal Reserve to moderate the pace at which it lowers interest rates, as well as, generally businesses are struggling with how to plan with the shifting tariff environment, so causing pauses in business investment, really apart from the AI sector. So GDP is still positive, don't expect to be particularly robust through the end of the year. Current forecast is it's going to pick up in 2026. We'll see. So GDP continues to slow for the remainder of this year. We still have 2 quarters to report. Supply chains have largely recovered. Consumer spending is stable but softening. The labor market is softening, still not falling apart, thankfully. Rate of inflation is declining, but it's being stubborn about having prices retreat. So they may have avoided the recession. So any questions on the economic outlook?
No economists.
Okay. I'll charge forward if I can find that screen again. Okay, take a quick stroll through the Urban Renewal Agency, and then we'll get back to forecast. So, you're all familiar with the site. Urban Renewal Agency is much simpler, doesn't have the 30-some-odd funds that the city does. It just has the 2 funds, the Riverfront Renewal Fund, which is effectively the general fund, and then the Debt Service Fund, which is what is used to collect the tax increment. So the Sandy River Greenway Riverfront Trail and Park is no more, because it is now the Sharon Nesbitt Heritage Park. And there she is, along with a number of other luminaries there. It turned out to be a beautiful day for her to do the ribbon cutting. Ta-da! And come on. So, as I mentioned, it turned out to be just a beautiful day for that. There we go. Those of you that haven't had a chance to see the trail, a number of beautiful improvements. Some loose ends still remaining, punch list items, still awaiting the delivery of the materials for the play area. So, Riverfront Park and Trail, the budget, is wash out to be about a 51-49 split in terms of, as Ray used to say, he likes to spend other people's money on city projects, so we like that. So the financing for the urban renewal historically, again, loans come from the city, the 6.6 in the non-TIF debt, full faith and credit, the 1.7 related to the brownfields cleanup fund loan, and then the TIF related debt, which is kind of apples and oranges. The tax increment fund, again, as I mentioned, it collects the resulting tax increment into the debt service fund. The increment assessed value is at $11,000,006 for this current cycle. I just got those reports from the county assessor. Again, the tax increment, the frozen base, continues to go to all the overlapping districts. The increment is what comes to the Urban Renewal Agency, and as improvements are done, the value rises, and that generates the increment revenue to pay debt. Same table updated from the budget adoption. Again, there's the $11,000,006 after the uncollectibles and discount. Should get about $164,000. So financing, again, the TIF back debt 2.4, 6.6 from the full faith and credit borrowing that we did, 1.7 from the Brownfields Fund, need about 8.3 to pay off those non-TIF related debts, because the TIF debt will be paid from the ongoing collection of the tax increment until it's retired. City may have to borrow again, potentially for potential development costs. That remains to be seen as to how the project evolves and moves forward. So, any questions on the urban renewal? So, outlook, assumptions are City Council wants to maintain services, avoid layoffs, continue operations and activities and projects, status quo. That's the assumption at this point. So there's some budget impact items, some are our choice internal, others are not our choice, they're external, not in our control. So service levels, spending initiatives, new programs, URA development assistance, items not in our control, property taxes, the economy, of course, legislative changes both at the state and federal level, and PERS cost increases. So budget impact items, who makes the decision depends on the timing. Before June 30th of the coming year, it's the council. For the budget beginning after July 1st, it would be the budget committee as part of their deliberations in this coming April. So I'm going to get into my charts that I typically do, and so cover some assumptions, all of which are subject to going to be different because reality is going to be different than what my assumptions are, but I provide at least a base to move from. So I've got wages factored in at a 3% COLA per year. Health expenses typically go up higher, and I've got those in at 5%. PERS contributions went up. They're on a biennium, and so they went up to 22% of wages effective this past July 1st. That goes through the next fiscal year. Current forecast from the PERS actuaries is bumped to 25% July 1st, 2027, which is the budget after next. Materials and services factored in at 3% growth per year. So just again, just to provide perspective, the general fund costs, the police operations, almost $6 million. Fire protections come in at second. As you can see, the rest of them trail off very quickly. The legislative department, the city council department, wins the record again. It's coming in as the most inexpensive general fund department. They're at the very tail end. This is sort of the same chart, just percentage-wise rather than dollar-wise. They're in the same relative order, but numbers, dollar amounts sometimes are more meaningful to people. Other folks' percentages are more meaningful to them. So again, same kind of layout. The fire contract. So 2025. Each of these numbers on here is a fixed known number, unlike the prior IGA, which was a number and then there was a percentage formula that we had to factor in. The current year was a one-year extension that was a fixed number that was agreed to. Council just at the recent meeting approved the 5-year extension of that. Those numbers are fixed and known. As the city manager mentioned, there's an opt-out clause that's available during the course of that. The police contract, this is an update of that chart that I've shown you before. This one shows just the 3 years that are in the IGA, because beyond that, we don't have a known number on the police costs as of yet. As I was mentioning, the police costs, I factored in, I used the same percentage increase. There was a 10% increase each year of the 3 years of the IGA. I applied that for the remainder. There's no reason to believe that it's going to be that number, but I had to pick something. So I picked that same number. The sheriff is from the corrections side and has pretty much made it clear that contracting services is not a high part of her vision for the sheriff's department. department, so I don't expect a lot of sympathy in terms of costs. But those 28, 29, and 30 costs are purely estimates. So that's just sort of those two numbers combined, kind of showing it rising from 8 million to over 12. This is the annual increase in costs year over year. Not the total cost, just the amount it's going up. Current year, the fire IGA, the police operations cost, property taxes, the $15 police and fire service fee, and then we're still funding a deficit out of the general fund balance. Again, the most important word up here on is in the top corner, the projections and estimates. You know, this is not set in stone necessarily. The fire contract, those numbers are what's been contracted for. Again, there can be an opt-out during the course of that cycle. The remaining 3 years on the second line, the police contract, those numbers are speculation, calculation, however you want to put it. The first 3 numbers are the numbers that are in the IGA that was agreed to. So your question about the, Gene, earlier about the cost, 5.2 was the IGA contract for the current year, goes to 5.7 next year, to 6.3 the year after with the sheriff's office. The 2 numbers combined, and so then there's that annual cost increase, the 777,000, 827, 903, etc. I plugged in an estimate of the police fire fee necessary to fund the increase, to try and keep level. And that's what it would project out, estimated. It's definitely going to be different, but that's just an estimate of what the monthly fee would rise to. So assumptions, again, fire service contract, 7.3% annual increase. That's what's in the contract. Police contract, 10%. First 3 years are in there. The remaining is using that as the basis. Capital outlay, 500,000 per year. Debt service costs are 678. They're going to go down to 509 after we get a couple of the internal loans paid off in the 29 year. General fund revenue assumptions, property taxes growing at 3%. We know that they never grow exactly at 3%, as from looking at the prior charts. All other revenues I've got plugged in at 1%. We may be fortunate to have greater than that. And I plugged in the police fire services increases to that levels that I showed you on the previous chart. Not that I necessarily expect that the council is going to warmly embrace those. I simply plugged them in to show you what it gets us. Property taxes, again, real market, maximum assessed value, remarket value, whichever is lower. So again, that's been our property tax history. I don't think there's any one of them in there that's exactly 3%. Hopefully we'll see some greater. General fund revenues, just like on the expense side, property taxes is the largest. Again, this is kind of the dollar snapshot. It dwarfs kind of all the other sources. This is the same thing, but percentage-wise rather than dollar-wise. Again, property taxes, the police fire services fee there is right in the middle at the 8% of the revenue. So again, the beginning fund balance, our 1.5, we had the ending fund balance of 8.7, which is our beginning fund balance for the year. It brings us into this year, projecting the budgeted 1.9 reduction in the fund balance, brings us to that 6.8. So that's the chart. Now, the very painful part of that is that's the ramp, and that includes those projected increases in the police fire fee that no one is going to want to embrace. This is what happens if we keep the police and fire fee at $15 a month. We're done in 2 years rather than 4 years. This is if we keep the police and fire fee at $15 and we join a fire district effective July 1st, 2028. That slight bump that you see there in the 28-29 year is a bump in property taxes that I'm a little nervous over, but I plugged it in there. It's what I can currently estimate would be the property tax bump that we would get from the BEST project when it comes off of the enterprise zone exemptions. It's a bit harder to calculate even than the FedEx or the Amazon ones because it is tied in with the electric utilities. It's not, the assessment isn't handled by the county assessor, it's handled by Salem as part of what is referred to as centrally assessed. So things that are network-based, all the PGE systems, the natural gas network, the railroad network, Comcast cable, they're all assessed centrally, and the Department of Revenue sends out numbers to the various counties and says, this is the taxes for that piece of property, and the county assessors shrug their shoulders and plug it in. It's a black box to them. This one, unlike Amazon and FedEx, is like that because it's been moved into the central assessment as part of the electric utility infrastructure. So based on the information I've got, in this first year of exemption, I think it's going to net us just a few $1,000s over $1 million of property taxes when it rolls off of the enterprise zone exemption. But that remains to be seen because I don't know what the central assessment changes will be by the time it comes off of the exemption. Anyway, that's, again, if we join the fire district, and then this is only theoretical where it's been talked about that, okay, we can't rely on fire by default that someone's going to come if we don't have contracted services. However, if we don't have contracted law enforcement services, we are still in the county, therefore the sheriff is obligated to provide law enforcement services. Wouldn't be any different than law enforcement services provided to unincorporated Multnomah County, but we wouldn't be paying a specific contract amount. Again, that may be financially possible. I don't know that it's politically possible. So that just sort of shows sort of what the problem is. Our expenditures running ahead of our revenues on an ongoing basis is what runs down that fund balance, kind of depending on the scenario. So, questions?
I'm sure there's some questions on this. Mr. Bent?
Yeah, what was the justification like for the fire department? 7.3% per year for 5 years, so we're looking at 37% over 5 years. How do they justify that without looking at them and telling them they're totally inflationary?
Well,
How do
I
they
guess I would
justify
say
it?
this, the 7% over 5 years, I believe still ends up being about $1.97 per thousand, correct? Something like that after 5 years.
For our tax.
Yeah.
Yeah, so right now we're paying about $1.55 per thousand per capita. And at the end of it, I believe Kenny's close to right, it's about $1.60-70 per thousand. And what Gresham's paying is $3.73 per thousand.
This conversation started at 373.
That's where they wanted us to start paying, $3.73 per thousand, which would have been in the 6 million range. We've knocked it down to
1.67.
If I'm understanding Gene's question, I think we've contracted with Gresham for 30 years. And that represents the percentage increase over those 30 years. It's an ongoing, I mean, what they wanted to try to do when they renewed our 10-year contract last spring was bump it to double or something, you know, what it was. So this is Gresham saying, okay, we'll keep doing what we've been doing with you guys, being Fairview, Wood Village, and Troutdale, for 30 years. That's why that's justified. It was Gresham backing off, way backing off, to give us a reason to keep contracting with them. You might recall, we were gonna go to Fire District 1, Clackamas Fire District 1. I mean, we were pulling out of Gresham, and Gresham said, whoops. And they relented. They came back down to numbers that we can work with. It still Gene, you're right, it's staggering, but it's a good deal. I mean, it's fair, let's put it that way, it's not
So
a
it's
steal.
167 versus they wanted
373. If we came in with 373, you guys would be looking for the Pepto-Bismol right now.
I mean, Gresham wanted to jack up the rate, well, we meaning Wood Village, Troutdale, and Fairview decided we couldn't live with it. It was so much. And this 5-year extension is for the 4 cities to come to their senses and realize that we're gonna have to rethink how we finance fire services. But at least it gives us 5 years to keep Troutdale safe.
Nice, I like that. I mean,
It's
I
not
appreciate
great.
that.
Yeah, it's not great, but it's certainly a better deal than they were offering before. And it represented a big back off from Gresham to.
And my speculation too, even back at the budget committees in April, is that the volume, by having these other cities, the cash flow it generates is more important to them than wanting to jack it up to 373 and then everybody leave and get out of it. And they need the cash flow of the other cities to help their whole entity. So that volume reduces their controllable expenses. It's like a triple net lease.
Yeah, I would say possibly, I'm not sure what's really important to them at this point.
Well,
So when we know, we'll tell you.
yeah, but just what she was saying, that they went back to the way it used to be, the way they look at
This
it.
is much more like
Because
the
that volume,
contracts of the last 30 years.
Yeah.
Which we've lived with for the last 30 years, and we're relatively satisfied. But when they wanted to change the way they figured it and make the 3 cities pay way more, that's when we said no.
and I do believe that volume. I just, I used to negotiate that volume where a person could live with a whole bunch of a smaller margin on a much larger dollar.
And right now, I'll just add, the 4 cities are meeting monthly. Well, we had our first monthly meeting, we're having another one next week. A task force to analyze the amount of money we've got and how we're gonna deliver fire services and what's gonna work the best. And this contract with Gresham that we agreed to, and Fairview Wood Village did too, is allowing us the time to negotiate.
Yeah.
And for Gresham to realize that we can't keep doing it the way we've been doing it. We can't. We gotta do something else.
So you're gonna you're continuing in this 5-year period to pursue.
Well, yeah, that's why we wanted the 1-year opt-out, which somebody asked about it. And there is a 1-year opt-out, and that's because we think when we finally see the light, we, all four cities, including Gresham, see the light, we'll all be in agreement that let's move to this other system, either Fire District 1, Fire District 10, our own fire district, something.
Over those
Anyway.
5 years, are our current services remaining the same?
Yeah,
Not
I
going down?
mean, however you analyze that, we at least have decent fire service, I think. I think we do, anyway.
What about
Most
the-
citizens feel that way.
Gresham came to the realization they can't even survive under this current system.
Right,
Even though all the other three cities have come to this, now Gresham realizes there's no future for them here. That we all have to go to district.
yeah.
How about with the police wanting 10%?
Pardon me?
The police services over 3 years wanting 10%? What's their justification? I'm happy with what you're telling me about the fire,
The
and so
justification.
it's job well done.
The justification is realistically kind of the same. Police, there was a slight cut in services, but I mean, this thing started out way higher than it was. And I can tell you, this is like rough stuff. You meet with them and talk to them, and they're like, well, that's how it is.
Yeah, the police were facing, or the sheriff was facing a major cut from the commission chair and so on. And they managed to escape that this year. And the 3-year agreement we got was ostensibly to allow us to start our own police department, if we can. I don't know if we're gonna be able to afford to do it that way, but we at least have 3 years, but it was a lot better deal than
What they
when we
started.
started out, it was,
Yeah.
that was another one where it was double or what, anyway.
And being that it's an IGA, during that 3-year period, they can't cut the services that we've given. Even if they have to cut, the sheriff has to cut her budget, it doesn't come out of our services. It comes out of everybody else's, but not ours, right?
Well, theoretically,
That's
it's
the
gonna be a
idea.
reduction in
That's the
staffing
agreement.
for-
That's the agreement.
Yeah, that's agreement. And also, one other question on the police. What's the status, or how did our lease payments change for the building?
With the lease payments, what we did is a reduction of service to the building ourselves. So we reduced the amount of staff service being provided to that building to help reduce our costs on it. And then they took on more costs or more of the maintenance side of the building itself. We still are responsible for a large portion of it, but we're not doing the everyday cleaning that we have.
Yeah, we used to have to do the cleaning, and apparently that was.
That was bad.
Yeah, so we kind of pulled back from some of that. We still have maintenance, upkeep and things like that to the building itself.
So the rate to them is the same, they're just gonna take on some of the costs.
Yeah,
Believe
and
me.
they reduced our services a little bit, I think. Right?
It's a good deal.
Yeah. We
We
still
got
have.
a good deal. I think, I don't know if they reduced our services. We're renting them the building.
Yeah.
And we don't have to do the daily cleaning or however it was.
We don't have a city chief anymore, but we have a resource officer who's in contact with us on a daily basis or whenever we need them.
Oh, so we don't have a police chief anymore?
No. So, but we have, Lieutenant Kramer is one of our contacts and meets with me weekly and our staff weekly. And then, Officer Gore is our resource officer, who we call if we need anything or we need to deploy with our staff or go out on site.
Is the more important thing, the resource officer.
Yeah, the resource officer is instrumental in a lot of what we do.
And one comment on Mr. Bohr. I was talking to a police officer with a county, his first name was Kevin, don't know his last name. But I was talking to him about all the street violations, especially left-hand turns, where left-hand turn lights are and everybody's running those lights. And he says, Gene, you need to talk to Officer Bohr. So, can you get him to start writing some freaking tickets? A lot of them. To me, if there's no consequence for their action, they're not gonna change their action. And I'm sitting in a left turn light, and my light turns green, going southbound on 257 to get on Stark to go home. And 3, 4, and 5, sometimes even 6 cars continue to come on Stark going eastbound, turning on to 257 going northbound. You can sit at that Shell station and write thousands of dollars of tickets every day.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Sandy, go ahead.
I had a question, and Eric, sorry if I missed this in your presentation earlier. Isn't there a limit as to how much a city can tax, and are we at that limit? I know Portland is, but I thought we had some headroom there.
Well, the property tax assessment is limited to 3% over the prior year's, what's referred to as maximum assessed value. So whatever your taxes were the prior year, a 3% increase is the max increase. The maximum assessed value is either 103% of the prior year tax or your real market value if your real market value is dropped to the point that it dips below that. That's the limitation. It's not a limitation on the dollar amount, it's a limitation on the rate of growth.
Sandy, can I ask just a clarifying question? Are you talking about before we reach compression?
That's it. That's the word, yes.
Okay. So in order to do that, the city of Portland has reached that compression cap because they have a number of districts, and they keep creating new districts, and when they create those new districts, that takes up a portion of that maximum assessed value on your property. In Troutdale, we're far from that edge of compression, so there's a lot of cap space there. So if we did adopt a new district, it would probably fall in without actually hitting that compression cap.
Okay. I see. Thank you.
Yep.
Fars, big word.
Yeah.
Okay, other questions? Councilor White?
Yeah, I'm kind of piggybacking on Gene's question about the lease, because that was a kind of a sticking point in last budget cycle, because there was some people wanted to, currently we're using the extra revenue from this lease to pay down the bond early. And there was an idea floated around to not do that and just add it for police and fire, similar to the $15 a month fee. But I assumed that lease was gonna come across council's desk. I never saw it. And it was kind of a sticking point last year's budget. So I'm kind of surprised to hear that it's gone through without an increase.
Well, the lease agreement, the way it's written, says that it runs with the law enforcement IGA. So because the law enforcement IGA was extended 3 years, the existing lease was extended 3 years. The same formula that was in place stays in place. It has a every other year CPI increase in the rate.
So they get a 30% increase out of us and we got nothing, is the way I look at that.
We got whatever the CPI calculation was, and I don't remember whether it was this year or the year before, because it's every other year.
This was in place when I came in, I think it was done, April?
It was done at the same time the original IGA was done 10 years ago.
Didn't we just renegotiate the police one though?
Yeah, the police IGA with a 3-year extension. Yeah. And the building lease says that
It's such a bad lease to begin with, you know, it should have never happened in the first place. So it's like 13 years now of a really poor lease. That's kind of disappointing.
Mr. Ben?
Are they still paying the same amount or percentages on the utilities on this new 3-year
The terms and conditions are, all remain the same, other than that change in the housekeeping, janitorial component that we talked about earlier. So I believe it's 72.5, I believe is the percent split. And that's unchanged.
Good.
Victoria Rizzo.
On the police and fire service fee, that you rent for the next few years adding on, did you say that wouldn't even cover what we had? Did you have a slide? If we kept increasing it.
The slide that had the fee on it, is that what you're asking?
Yeah, if we kept increasing it.
Switch here. Is that what you're talking about, or you're talking about the chart?
And that's fine.
So the annual cost increase is that line in the middle of the two contracts above.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
I have a question.
Councilor Lehman?
I had a couple of questions about what Glenn brought up. So if they change the IGA, the terms of the IGA, why can't we change the rent part of that?
Well, the parties can agree to anything you want, but the lawyers basically say the existing lease is in place, so unless you can sweet talk the county into saying, we'll give up the position we're currently in,
Right.
we don't really have any leverage to make them change it.
Councilor Allen?
But I'm still stuck on why didn't it come to the council? Because I'm just as frustrated and confused as to, we made changes to the contract, but yet they're still paying the same amount.
The council wouldn't have been able to change it. The extension of the lease runs with the extension of the police services IGA. It runs with that. I guess I'm talking like a lawyer, but, and so the council couldn't say, oh, we'll accept the services part, but the lease we want to change. Well, I mean, Ray and I tried. I mean, we tried to, but frankly, Ray picked out the one thing that worked, which was the this cleaning services thing, which he said was really a burden on the city. And we got that, and I was surprised we got that, so.
How much was that?
In money, I don't know the dollar amounts, but it was every month, it turned out to be very burdensome we had to hire people to clean the building. It's secured and what goes on, I don't remember. Ray sold it to me anyway, that was a really burdensome thing for the city. And if we could get the county, and the counties has a cleaning, maintenance, probably department, who knows, the county, but they agreed to it, and we didn't have to pay for it anymore. I don't remember how much it was. Do you?
I don't recall the exact numbers.
I mean, it was like 70,000 a month, or it's just a number that sticks in my mind, but it was real money.
It was a bunch of our staff here consistently vacuuming, cleaning, toilets, changing toilet paper, and we were providing all the supplies as well, so it was all the toiletries, all the supplies, as well as cleaning and everything else, so hopefully.
I guess I didn't remember the city staff.
Okay, my two initial questions were the last slide that you showed with the, if we go to a district and we leave the $15 fee on. So the discussion when the $15 fee went on was that if we go to a district, we're not gonna be able to sell it to the voters if we keep that $15 on there, and that would probably get dropped off. So I think the calculations are gonna have to be adjusted on that one. And then my last question was, who determines the PERS?
So your question is
Yeah,
about,
that one right there, where you have the $15 and the contract is not renewed. So if we go with the district.
this isn't going with the district. This one is just not renewing the lease contract. We're still paying Gresham Fire under this.
The police and fire fees stay at 15. Oh, I see, we just dropped.
Okay, I'm trying to change one variable at a time, otherwise it gets to be too difficult to try and see the impact of the different pieces.
Okay, I was thinking we were dropping both.
And then your other question was about PERS?
Yeah, who determines the city's contribution?
Well, it's all, well, ultimately, technically it's PERS board, but it's all done by Milliman Actuaries, which is who does the exhaustive actuary study for the PERS system. They do one annually. Every other year is what they refer to as a rate setting report. The year in between is an advisory report, but they go through a big, long, well, there's a PERS board meeting this coming Friday, and I think their preliminary actuary report is like 139 pages of the packet. Anyway, they calculate it all at an aggregate level, and then they have to go through and once the policy decision is made, then they have to go through and apply it at each PERS participating employer. So then they come down and we get a report every year. Like I say, one's a rate setting, one's a advisory, 60 pages. But it's an actuary, and it's based on the actuarial rules. They're looking at longevity, they're looking at mortality rates, they're looking at the return of the rate on the investment portfolio, kind of all the different factors that factor in it, and they also have to factor in what legislative changes did the legislature make to the PERS system, and then how does that affect the unfunded actuarial liability, which is the big piece that's being paid down.
So you had another one?
Pardon?
You said you had another question, sir?
Oh, no, that was good.
Mr. Ben?
When does the geo bond on the police department building end? Isn't it early 2030? Something, early 30?
Look here at the schedule, it's
Longer than
2030, 2031 fiscal year is the last year of payment, so.
That's what I thought, around the early 30s, so 2031?
Yeah, so that would be the final payment would be June 1st, 2031, because of the way the payments are structured. Interest only on December 1st, principal and interest on June 1st is how the most municipal bonds in Oregon are structured, ours as well. So our final payment would be that June 1st of 2031, which would be part of the 2030-31 budget. The last 30 days of it, but that would be the last budget that it's in.
Is there a way to utilize that fund no longer being needed to be funded because it's paid off by the taxpayers, to where that money could be in the general fund to reduce health offset or monies? How could we get the citizens to?
That every year when I have you pass the motions as the budget committee, you pass 2 tax levies. One is for the general permanent rate, which is what funds the general fund, and the other one is for the property tax on the general obligation bond. And the voters approved it specifically for that. It's the only thing I can use that levy for, and once that debt is no longer there, we can no longer pass a levy for it, because that's what the statute allows. In fact, it's so tight, I can't pay bank fees, I can't pay the reporting costs, only thing I can pay out of that is principal and interest, that's it. And once that bond is paid off, that separate levy goes away. That's just the nature of how.
I'm just thinking, if there could be a way that we can convince the citizens, now that you don't have this tax burden, we can help offset these increases to fire and,
I'm sure that if we were a different government agency, we'd be trying to find some way right now to weasel this out of the citizens for another 20 years. But it's ending unless we want to float another bond.
well, no, that's what I'm more thinking.
And school districts
Rather than
frequently
trying-
will structure their capital projects such that they're completing a bond payment series and they're planning the next capital, remodel of high school or whatever, so that they can have it start when that one ends, so that it's not double stacked, but it's also, they don't have a big drop. It's much easier for the taxpayers to say, okay, I'll continue to pay because it's about the same. School districts, because they typically have, a need to redo schools over a cycle, so.
No, I call it the perpetual GO bonds.
Well, yeah, to some degree, but it's a separate series, but yeah,
Right.
it's the same principle. The city doesn't have that type of capital facility need, so.
I was just trying to see, when I saw, you were looking at like $68, $69 safety fee in 5 years versus $15. So I was thinking, is there another way we can offset that in a different fashion?
We could do a 5-year
Fire
levy.
districts, yeah.
Yeah, we could do a 5-year levy, that's what Gresham did for police and fire. That's voted on by the people. It's money that can be used for a stated purpose.
But it allowed them at least to have a say.
Yeah,
The voters always have a say in it.
yeah, it's.
Good thinking that couldn't we use this money further?
And I didn't mean to use the money, I just mean,
Yeah.
say, we don't have this debt anymore, and maybe to help offset this debt rather than hitting them with $69 a month.
Yeah.
On their water bill plus the water. I mean, you're looking at.
Well, the way it's usually sold
$200.
is, there'll be no increase if you vote for this, because the other ones disappear, that's the way they always sell it.
Yeah,
And it usually works, actually.
Local option levy is what's being referred to, and it has to go to the voters, and
Yeah.
for operations, it's 5 years, for a capital item, it's 10 years, but they're temporary and they have to be renewed.
Just some food for thought.
Good thing.
Yeah, it might be the fallout version, so if, at the end of this fire district task force, the 4 cities decide that they wanna do a fire district and one city doesn't go along with it, well, that city's still gonna have to figure out how to pay for fire service at the same rate the other 3 cities are essentially providing that service, so maybe that does turn into a public safety levy or some other mechanism. Right? I don't know all the answers with the crystal ball, but there's fire service levy, that's definitely an option.
Councilor White?
Well, I think, this conversation shows, that we're kind of in a tough spot. And I would have liked to seen a slide of all the new fees and increases we've been hit with, the mounted college bond, the library tax, the homeless tax. There's just been a litany of them. And I'd like to see that worksheet just to give what the average home owner's been hit with in the last couple of years. I think it's an important number that's been left out, because I don't think we're gonna pass a bond or a levy. But I like your idea, Gene. It's like, what can we do to avoid, making it $66 in a few years for that fee? Because for like Saul, his restaurant, the $15 fee for him ends up being $250 for his restaurant. And, you know, there's a lot of other people, if you own multiple properties, it really adds up in a hurry. You know, so, you know, you'd be looking like $1,000 a month fee for a restaurant or something like that. But we do have the ability to grow our way out, just like the battery farm. I know it's not online yet, but when it comes in, the revenue is going to be close to, and Mike worked it out, about 800,000. And I'm like, this committee could say that money needs to be earmarked for police and fire. And the price is so high now, I think we could really realistically look at doing fire service ourselves. And hopefully if we could get Wood Village and Fairview to agree to that. And then we'd actually be saving lives too, because I think if we did it ourselves on a small scale, we could have good response times. It's hard to get north and south. It's a lot easier to go east and west because you got the freeway. I think that's stuff we're gonna have to look at. And we're gonna have to look at any new money and kind of force, I think we're pretty well staffed at this point. You know, let's live within our means more than we have been. I don't think any of us knew how dire things were gonna be over this police and fire contract, but it just shows you it's better to be in charge. And there's 244 cities in Oregon, and only 35 cities have a fire district. So let's look how smaller cities are able to pull it off, you know. I think there's a cheaper solution out there. Gresham Fire is going to bankrupt Gresham at the rate they're going. I mean, they're in a lot more trouble than we are. So it's like, I kind of don't want to join a sinking ship myself. And with everything we've been hit with the last few years, I don't think a lot of people can afford it. We haven't seen the raises in the private sector like we're seeing elsewhere. But we're like the only source to fund it. So to me, it's not going to work. I think we've really got a lot of heavy lifting to do now that we know where we're sitting. And let's start saving money, you know, anywhere we can. And I like the idea, like the parking thing at Glen Auto. I like how we protected our citizens. They didn't have to pay it. They can register a car. It's kind of like our gas tax, the same thing. They don't have to buy gas in Troutdale. You can buy it anywhere you want, but a lot of people passing through stop in Troutdale and fill up, and that turned out to be a great program. I'm glad we have it. I'd like to see us look at more ideas like that. You know, so hopefully the parking at Glen Auto, and we earmark that money too, so it goes for improvements in parks. So it just doesn't get lost in the general fund. So I think we're gonna have to kind of do the, like I said, the heavy lifting. And I think with Tanny's help, Tanny's really good at crunching the numbers. And he's usually advocating for the people, you know. And I think we need all of us to start thinking that same way.
I don't know if you heard, but it's been real recent. They came out with the amount of money spent on homelessness in the Tri-County area, and it was like 740 some thousand million dollars for 2024, and it equated to $97,000 per homeless. 97,000 per homeless, and that was using inflated numbers, not using the actual numbers. And I just heard the police chief say in Portland, say our homeless numbers are rising.
Right.
And these NGOs are out there spending this money and pocketing the bulk of it, and the homeless really aren't getting anything. And they showed examples of different people and their services, and people walking by from NGOs serving these people, and before those people were out like a light, totally unconscious on drugs, and just walking away. But not $97,000 per homeless, and the Tri-County is supposed to think that's a well-spent money.
Yeah, and maybe they've helped 1,400 people, maybe. I
It's-
mean, so in other words, $794 million has not helped anybody.
And then numbers have gone
Virtually.
up.
Yeah,
Homeless has gone up.
absolutely.
It's really bad, and we kind of just have to go down to the county and bark at them.
Yeah, it's the county. County's.
Well, I use that just as an example of utilizing money efficiently.
Yeah.
Versus.
We have 80 million to worry about, though, and we're gonna try to do the best we can with that.
I didn't mean to get off.
No, you're okay. All right, okay, other questions before we go further?
I have a question.
Ms. Timmerman?
In July, there was a purchase of property up on the hill, and obviously it wasn't in the budget, so when I look at the resolution, so borrowed money from the Parks Improvement Fund to the general fund for the purchase of the property and for improvements to the building. And so that puts a burden on the general fund for the next 10 years to pay all that back. So are there any other items, are there any other things that the general fund has been burdened with since we last met in April?
I don't know what I would say, like for this year, the year we finished.
No, this current year. Because the resolution was passed in July.
Okay.
So that was, so obviously when we had our meeting in April, we didn't know anything about this, that this was happening. And so now we have it, and so now the general fund has to pay it back in 10 years. So we go into this knowing that we already have a problem with our general fund. Yet we go ahead and we buy some property that we don't have the money for, and now we have to, the general fund is still gonna have to pay for it. That just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And then, what was the purpose of buying the property? Why did we buy it? What's it for?
I'm not privy to everything about it, how it was decided, but the idea is to have city staff in a building owned by the city instead of renting space. So there will be a savings from the general fund you currently use to rent space. That's one thing I can think of, and move staff to a building owned by the city. There was an opportunity, and I wasn't directly involved, but I know Ray was, and but that was certainly one of it. You asked for justification, that would be how the money spent from the general fund for paying back for that building will be balanced by what we won't have to rent in space elsewhere. I don't know how the numbers pencil out, but that's
It's
the
a,
justification I heard.
Ray's approach was that it was a long-term investment. The repayment is $150,000 a year plus interest to the Parks Improvement Fund. That's approximately twice the amount that we're paying in rent that we'll stop paying after we move out of the spaces. Ray's position was that once we have it paid off, we won't be paying rent anymore and we'll own the building. That was the deal that was struck. That was what the staff reports and what the resolutions that he brought to council for approval. That's the only addition. That's actually an example of a mid-year budget adjustment. Going back to your question earlier on, I forgot about that one. Yeah, that was done after the budget was adopted. But that's the only one I can think of that's occurred since then.
I mean, it's a very good question, but
Yeah, oh, if I could add to that too, it allowed the church to buy the other church by the post office as well. And both those properties were zoned multifamily, like they would have most likely been developed into apartments. So now we continue to have the bigger church functioning as a church, and and then we're gonna have City Hall, and there's room to grow. It gets staff under one roof too. It was difficult for Ray and now Mike to, try to manage staff when they're in these remote locations, so I think that'll add a lot, and it was a good deal. It was unanimously voted on by the council as well.
And it's for the future. The idea is that we will then own it.
The other
Have to rent
ideas
space.
were, like, estimates were like 20 million for a new city hall, and we're like, yeah, we can't afford that.
So then just, what other city properties does the city own?
We have we have about 6 different office spaces, so the staff are kind of siloed in 6 different spots. There's Public Works up here, Parks and Recs over by
Community development.
Columbia Park, and then community development and building codes is up there. And we have office admin down here downtown, and then we have city executives up above. And you have the visitors center where we have economic development.
Yeah,
So we're just
right next door here in the CCB.
yeah, we have recreation and
IT.
events over here. Yep. Oh, wastewater down. So we are spread to every corner of the city right now. No one roof, no place to call.
Victoria, do you have your hand up? Okay, I'm sorry. Mr. Mango?
Thank you. Actually, I did find the resolutions for the 24-25 tax year, do some research. Resolution 2625, Resolution 2634, and Resolution 2659. All change the budget like you were talking about, Eric. So I haven't looked at what's changed the budget for the 25-26 year. Well, my comment, the reason I raised my hand, is something I brought up a year ago, and I know it was controversial, and I got a good explanation from Eric. In fact, thank you so much for writing me a very long email to explain the contingency fund situation. And Ray Young also added his 3 cents to that, and I appreciate that very much. It still is a question that I have that in the 25-26 approved budget, there is almost $20 million in contingency funds. If you look at 3.3 million in sewer reimbursement and 212,000 in street reimbursement, et cetera, et cetera. Not every fund has a contingency fund. Storm sewer has 1.1 million. Parks improvement has 1.7 million. Storm sewer improvement has almost 3 million. Okay, and I understand from your lengthy discourse that these contingency funds were derived by various levies or bonds or so on. Some were received by county or state grants. Some were received by voter-approved levies and fees and so on. And we've got this money, $20 million, except for whatever other budget changes may have taken place since the 25-26 budget was passed. Because in 24-25, yeah, there was about $1.5 million I can see that was moved from contingency funds to allocated to actual costs. Cost increases in personnel and materials and so on. Okay, so $1.5 million of the 17 was used. How much of this $19.9 million contingency total will be used is necessary? I wonder. Will it also be $1.5 million? Will it be $2 million? What is the expectation? If it is something like $1.5 million, $2 million, that's still $17 million. Now, there's restrictions on those monies based on how they were derived. And from where? Well, my question then is, if we had grants or certain other fees, funds, et cetera, that came from the state or the county, why can't we go back to the state or the county and say, okay, you gave us this money, we need it, but we don't need it in sewer improvement, $2.5 million. We don't need it in storm sewer improvement, $3 million. Otherwise, it would be allocated and not just there because, and I'm not talking about unappropriated, because unappropriated is exactly there for cash flow needs, timing needs, etc., that cannot be altered. But the contingency funds, those that were based on levies on the public, could we go back with a vote and say, yes, we levied this, we had a bond that, we have funds that are desperately needed in fire and police and not so much needed in parks improvement, for example. I'm just posing that as if they're restricted because of how we obtain them, is there a legal means of going back to whom we received those funds from, like a vote of the public, and say, we levied you, but now we need these funds. Instead of here, we need them there. Could we take $4 or $5 million or 6 or 7 million out of the nearly 20 million to pay for what we're desperately trying to figure out how to fund?
Okay, couple things, okay, and I'll try to just take as much of this as I can so you can fire back, okay?
Okay.
With your other question. Okay, example like sewer improvement, water improvement, stormwater improvement, all of those, street improvement, those funds are paid by SDCs. So if you come in and develop property, you pay into those. And so those are paid by specific people for the development that's going in. So those are all state mandated. We don't have access to those, and when that methodology is created and then voted on, that's it. It's not pretty, and parks improvement's another one. And so and then the utility funds, sewer, storm, water, those types of things, that money is collected by the ratepayers and put into a bucket to fund those systems. So it's kind of like, if we could take the money, we would have to pay it back. Even if we could take it, it'd have to be paid back into those funds. We can't take it out of those funds without somebody, probably you, going to jail. And of course, and you brought up unappropriated, and you're totally right, and those really aren't touched, don't get touched or anything.
Absolutely.
But those contingency funds in each one of those budgets can be spent at any point. They're not off limits. So if something happens and that money...
within that specific fund.
Within that fund, correct.
Right.
And the same would go, so when you have your sewer fees or your stormwater fees or water fees, those are system charges that are there, and then they have an outlook of what systems they're gonna need to replace and everything.
Okay.
They're building that pot of money, so when that $2 or $3 million project all of a sudden reaches a point that it needs to get replaced, those funds are in that contingency that they can draw from to do that capital improvement in the next budget year, whenever those come. So when you think about some of these funds, whether you're talking water, sewer, stormwater, streets, those are on a different sort of fund system than you would have like your general fund or parks. General fund, parks, some of those things, you would have your capital improvement list, that's where your SDCs are gonna come in. So when you're talking about parks improvements and those sort of things, those are established through like a capital improvement list. Those are projects that the community has determined are their projects over the next 50 years or whatever.
So,
in their master plan.
okay, so I understand. So in every case, every contingency in every fund, our hands are tied by the state. Is that what you're saying?
Not by the state. They're tied
Well, you're
by-
saying, you said the
some
state
are certainly tied.
SDCs,
Yep.
which are Oregon revised statute, mandates transportation SDC, water, sewer, stormwater parks.
Yeah, so what happens is,
Now, what about code specialties? There's 800,000 contingency in code specialties. Is that an SDC as well?
That is,
Code specialties is a special revenue fund. It's also the use of the building permit fees is what is the revenue for that fund. And state statute requires that you use building permit fees to operate the building permit system. So again, we could borrow from it, but we would have to pay it back. We can't take funds from that and go spend it on parks maintenance. We could borrow from it, but then again, we'd have to repay it.
like gas tax has to be used on streets. Street funds that come in from the state, they have to be used just solely on streets. Our funds that we receive from your water bill or your sewer bill, those have to go back into water and sewer uses or upkeep of the system. Like there are governing regulations on every fund that we have that restrict how those monies are spent and what those monies can be spent for. If we want to do something outside of that envelope, we have to go to the voters and ask for permission to go do that.
Outside, yeah. But are there any contingency fees that fall into that category?
So I would also,
doesn't sound like it.
Before I jump into that question, I would also mention that typically governments such as ourselves and others, we will tend to operate off of a deficit for like the first 5 or 6 months of every fiscal year, right?
Right.
So,
well, that's
July,
unappropriated
August,
funds.
Right. So you have to have that cushion, if you will, to operate those
But that's
5,
not
6 months
contingency
before the tax
funds.
revenues come in.
Right, but that's
Correct.
not what the purpose of contingency funds. That's the purpose of the unappropriated funds.
Yes,
Exactly.
hopefully that's enough, and the
Okay.
contingencies are there
All right.
as a rainy day.
So I have to go back to my congressperson, the state senate and state congress, and talk to them about changing the Oregon revised statutes to potentially free up some of this money that's stuck in these buckets.
Yeah, because I think when you look at some of our funds, sewer, water, we have like reimbursement fund this, reimbursement fund that. Those are for capital improvements that the city is putting in, whether it's our sewer treatment plant or new towers for water storage or drilling new wells. Those are all large capital improvement fund projects that we have to draw from those contingencies.
Well, but then those funds should be appropriated
They would be.
to those
on that line.
purposes,
So right now you're building
not
that
sitting as
contingency.
a
So you can draw from.
contingency.
Yeah, so you build your contingency and then you draw from your contingency when you have a big capital project.
The reason they're listed in the budget for those capital project funds, in particular, year to year, is that there may not be a specific capital project like well number 9 that is planned for the year. There may be other ones that are planned and they're listed out in the capital section. The money that's put in contingency is it is considered an appropriation. The council is appropriating it, so it's available to be spent during the year, but it hasn't been specified that it's for a particular project or for personnel or for some other item. But that contingency can only be accessed if staff comes back to the council during the budget year and says, we had this thing happen in water, we need $500,000 to deal with this catastrophe or this opportunity or whatever it is, council then approves us transferring out of contingency into the capital project. So it's in the budget and it's in that contingency line because it isn't specified for something specific, but it's in contingency rather than unappropriated, because if it's in an unappropriated balance, I can't come to the council and say, we had this catastrophe, we need 500,000.
Right.
So
Okay.
the contingency line may be a little confusing from that standpoint.
So we've got.
Well, I understand it.
Got it?
I got it.
Okay,
Thank you.
just trying to help. Other questions?
Okay, we ready to finish up? So, work. Finances are okay in the current year. I wouldn't say they're fabulous. However, the fund balance cushion is declining. Public safety costs, of course, are our immediate challenge. Near-term economic challenges, and the 8.1 is the biggest debt challenge. Again, same assumptions that I mentioned earlier on. Questions, meeting wrap up. The purpose was to inform, update, have you think about next year. Wanted to mention these dates are different than what I told you at the last meeting, because I haven't looked at the calendar closely, and just the way it happens to fall, our meetings are usually the 13th, 14th, 15th. The way the calendar happens to fall, it's Monday the 20th and Wednesday the 22nd for the upcoming budget cycle. So with that, that's all that I have. I'll leave it to the chair and others for closing comments, unless there's other questions. So that concludes my presentation for the evening, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so the first meeting will be
Monday the 20th.
the second meeting will be the 22nd, and the third
Wednesday the 20th.
meeting and fourth meeting would be.
Not happening. We're gonna get done in 2 nights.
Just check. Okay, I got asked this, so I will, provide this. People were asking how much contingency was spent, and the total that came out of contingency that went into the budget for the general fund was I don't know everything that is for. 1.1 of the 1.175 of the 3 million that was in there was utilized. Okay. And then there was some out of some other funds, but that was what was from the general fund. Right. And anything.
I'm looking at it, it's right, it was almost 1.6, well, 1.5 and change, I guess. It's
Total.
from the general fund contingency, because we had 485,000 of contingency expire at the end of the year unused. Because you never spend contingency, you always move it somewhere else. So we had that much unspent contingency when the year ended from 3 million. So 1.5, so about half.
Ms. Glantz.
I have a question for Eric and for Mike. When we come into the April actual budget meetings, in the past, there's been some differing approaches. If there's something in the budget that we don't think should be in there, do you want that handled for us to come prepared with line items? Or do you want that, I mean, whether it's an increase or decrease, whatever it is, or do you want a general, we want this increase or this decreased? How do you want that? What's the most efficient way to do that?
So what I'll try to do, and what I hope to do anyways, is work with Eric to bring you a balanced budget And that way, when we show up, hopefully we have a balanced budget that we're presenting to you. And then if there's something that you want to change or adjust, then we'll need to figure out how that needs to be adjusted so that we can still provide the services that we're supposed to be providing for. If that makes sense. I think it's going to be a bit of a challenge sometimes, but it's just figure out how to make it work, you know? Eric, do you have anything to add on that? I mean, that's been my experience.
In answer to your question, I mean, based on the local budget law, you know, staff's supposed to provide a proposed budget based on our best understanding of available resources and the desired programs of the council. And so we were obligated to present that, and then how that falls out, you know, if the council and budget committee members want to make adjustments to those service levels or other items, and that of course is entirely up to them. How you do that, I don't want to stifle or inhibit that process because as the local budget law provides, you're free to address any item in the budget. How, you want to address it in a grand scale and say, staff, go back and find $500,000. Okay, we can take that assignment. Or if you want to come and say, I want us to spend $450,000 less on water park maintenance next year. Pick something we don't have so I don't get anybody freaked out. Then, you're certainly free to do that, to say that you don't think that's a community priority and that we shouldn't be spending money on it. That's whichever way is going to work for the committee members.
And then I think there's two different phases of this. I think the budget committee's here, right? So then I think that recommendation comes from the budget committee to make those amendments. And then so I think when we go to the council, you would have the budget recommendation plus the budget committee's recommendation, and the council then has to adopt the budget based on whatever those programming are. And then I think the struggle comes when we try to reallocate funds to one particular use. Then we have to figure out where to pull those funds from, right? So it gets a little challenging on finding the right balance. And maybe that's a question for the budget committee, or a question that the budget committee puts on us to go try to figure out how to reallocate to make it happen.
Okay. I've been through a few of them, and there's been some years that it's preferable to have it done one way, and some years it's done a different way. So I just wanted to ask now before we go into it and take the deep dive into our favorite nighttime reading.
I guess I would say, I look at this, and frankly, the one that scares me is when I look at 2728 on Eric's graph of $1,196,500 for an ending fund balance. I always think that you never want to have that number below 2 million anyhow. But that thing looks like a black diamond downhill ski run. It's going down so fast, and I think, we've talked about fire districts, and I'll just tell you, I don't see that happening until probably 27, 28 anyhow, even if it does. So I think we need to be thinking about going forward and assuming that that could be where we're at, and how do we keep from going into that hole? Because there's always the possibility that we go out for a fire district and then it doesn't pass. And if we wound ourselves up for that, we're going to be in worse shape. That's kind of the bad news, but I just think it is something we have to think about, and I think we're going to have to address in April.
I'm going to pose one related question.
Yes, sir.
Is there any legitimate service that fire and police give to the parks?
Give to the parks?
Do they provide any like fire protection for our parks?
Well, if if there was a fire in a park, I'm sure we would call and I'm sure they would come.
So the parks could pay the general fund some fee to have fire protection of the parks.
Well, technically, I think parks are in the general fund.
They are.
We're paying.
So you're already, your
Parks.
general fund's already paying for parks out of the general fund.
Oh.
Yeah.
And not for like any of these other funds?
So the SDC fund is what you're talking about, and the SDC fund can only be applied to capital improvements that are on the capital improvement list that's approved by the community as a whole.
I'm just looking at various ways, legitimate ways to move money, like IGAs.
Yeah.
Or transfer in, transfer outs that
Fair
can be adopted. Or legitimate services provided to a particular fund can then be, that's a transfer out to cover, so.
You can do some of that, I think, and you'll see it in the budget as kind of like an inter-fund transfer typically.
Right.
Those are where you're applying some administrative costs for that particular service that's providing to manage that grant or to manage that fund, and you'll see those department fund, or those inter-fund transfers, and that's basically what you're talking about, moving that fund to pay for a service related to what that is managing. But there's certain rules and of course and guardrails in place by either the granting agency or the levy administration or what have you, and as what Eric was talking about earlier with the GO bond, we can't even apply administrative fees for managing it, right? Because it's all scripted out and those guardrails are so strict. So.
Yeah, I mean, we have 12% of the revenue coming into the general fund is coming from other funds currently in the current budget. The third bar there. And that is what Mike was talking about. It's administrative overhead. I mean, we have one payroll department. We don't have a separate payroll department for the WPCF and a separate payroll department for the water fund and a separate payroll department for the street fund. We have one payroll department. Same thing, one IT department, one finance department, one city council. All of those things are all bundled into that.
So a bill goes to each of the funds for their share.
That's part of it, and then there are specific services such as some of the parks and facilities staff will do greenway maintenance for some of the public works facilities, like there's a requirement to keep the vegetation around certain water infrastructure in a certain condition. And so there's a reimbursement, essentially a service fee that's being paid by the water fund for the parks folks to do the mowing. You know, so that is already occurring. It gets adjusted. It's something I'll look at again for the upcoming budget.
So there's a parks improvement.
Just over $2 million.
There's a parks improvement fund.
That's the SDC fund.
That's the SDC fund that can only be used for capital improvement. Can't pay for fire service.
Right, anything that's in there that's an improvement fund or reimbursement fund or capital project list items, not operations items.
Looking for money.
And it's a great idea. It's kind of like, it's in the same pair of hands, it's almost in the same pocket.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyone else? Final thoughts? Councilor White, please.
Eric, do you mind going to your slide that talked about status quo and not doing layoffs?
Second here,
Council directive.
So let's see here. There we go. That one?
Yeah. So because I'm usually the one that asks, so are we gonna just do status quo with our current staffing levels? And for a couple of years, I've been told, yeah, we're not gonna hire anybody new. And then, we hired a grant writer one of those years, and then we were arguing over hiring a parks worker, because we were told we weren't gonna hire anybody. And then we found out that the parks worker had already been hired. So I guess I'm gonna ask this question again, you know, are we planning on any new hires coming up?
My understanding was that we are anticipating potential turnover in the future. And so the members that were brought in this last year were to avoid the drop off in institutional knowledge and provide a little bit of an overlay between those that we are anticipating potentially retiring in the near future and those that just came in. I'm not sure what our staffing levels were last year, to be honest with you.
And those were in non-public works funds, non-general fund staffing. Those were in public works funds. At this point in time, I haven't had any of the other department directors approach me about additional staffing needs, but we haven't really started the budgeting process yet. So that'll be part of the process. Is they get their budget worksheets, they look at it, and then they come back with their proposals. And in prior years, they proposed things that Ray hasn't even let get to the budget committee. So it'll be a question of whether they make a case that's persuasive enough to say that they want a staff member to fulfill this function, and we decide it's a worthwhile enough proposal to bring to the budget committee. Doesn't mean that the budget committee will approve it, but at the moment, I'm not aware of any. We want to add 2 staff here, 1 over here, 1 there. I'm not aware of any.
I've heard a little bit of, it sure be nice to have a few more hours for this, or sure be nice to have a few more hours for that.
We have some part-time folks that they might want to inch up.
But I haven't heard adding a whole new person.
I think that might be a challenge, given, the Black Diamond ski ramp we're headed down. But I guess the other thing is, when you showed the increase on the police and fire fee, I would like to see an effort to grow our way out of it. Instead, I don't think we can keep asking the public for more and more and more. And I really would like to see a slide that shows, all the cost increases that have impacted people that live in Troutdale. Because I know it's been the worst amount of increases I can ever remember.
I'll say we don't necessarily have all the tax information that the tax and ratepayers are actually paying, because we only see one little segment of your taxes. So really, we have to inquire Multnomah County for a lot of that information. We don't necessarily see all the levies or the school district or park district or the, park district, I think, but like library or community college or those things. We don't see those revenue streams at all. So for us to even have an idea of what is outside of just us, our sphere in this tax cycle, we have to go to Multnomah County and try to get an idea. And then getting a straight answer from them is a little challenging because each house is taxed differently sometimes, or each neighborhood is taxed differently. So there's all these different.
Well, my ask was to take the average price home, what was it, 486,000 or whatever it was, and then you could apply like the Multnomah County, like the license fees, the transportation fee, and the Mount Hood Community College fee, the $15 police and fire. I mean, there's such a long list of those.
I can put something together. It's going to be incomplete. Of course, it's going to be, quote, an average. I think all it's going to do is illustrate the stark reality is the only place the city gets revenue from is from the public. We're not Midland, Texas. We don't have oil wells on city property. The only place we get money from is the public, one stream or another. But we certainly can illustrate it. It's not really going to change, but I'll probably miss something that you'll need to add to it when I have it up on screen.
Well, you know, we do get money from businesses, you know, with the Trick property especially. And we've got a new one that's gonna come online soon. I think we need to start looking at earmarking that revenue and protecting it, so it just doesn't get lost into the general fund. And then we're continuing, like you just said, to look at the public, to fund every single thing. And maybe, like I brought up the gas tax, you know, it's like over $1 million a year that brings in, very helpful. And like what we're doing at Glen Auto Park, you know, like charging for parking, I'd like to see more of an effort in that direction to grow our way out. I'd like to see that fee go away, that $15 fee. I certainly don't want to see it increasing.
The best property, the battery site that you're talking about, is that bump right there.
Okay, is that far out? Wow,
Yeah,
I thought it was close.
I've already got it factored in. My calculation is it's just over $1 million based on what I know today, but it's already incorporated. So I don't see any development in the next 12 months that's gonna bring us excessive property tax, because there's no projects that are underway that are of any kind of scale like that.
I think the real struggle that we're all seeing is increased cost of goods, increased cost of services across the board, whether it's police, fire, staff, what have you. When we go out for bids for a government building, this building here, I think was like, what, $7 million just 10 years ago, 15 years ago? And we get an estimate to build something similar and it's $22–30 million. I mean, that's just three times the cost of what it was doing business just 10 years ago. You know, it's an unfortunate escalation of our economy. And I think the bad thing is that our tax rate, bad or good, is on flat level. It's not going any higher than 3% every year. That's basically where it's bottoming. So we can raise additional revenue, we can grow, and by adding houses or adding additional development, we might get a bump here and there, and maybe that 3% goes up to 4% one year, and it's back to 3% next year. We might be able to get bumps here and there, but right now, with the way the tax code is structured, we're falling behind every year. We're getting further and further behind what it costs doing business. And the only way to really resolve that is to address the tax structure in the state of Oregon, to have like something like what California did with their, was it Prop 13, where there's like a reassessment upon sale or transfer of ownership. So at least then you get back to a baseline of taxes on it, but otherwise we're gonna steadily decline every year.
I have some ideas I'll bring up.
Okay. Mr. Bent?
I would advocate for Glenn's comment about, unless an employee is retiring or leaving, that we don't bring to the budget committee in April any additional staff until we can have a much clearer picture on what's going on with fire and police services.
If a position is retiring or leaving, that doesn't come to us because staff has the ability to reload those positions because they're already in the budget. It would be, what we approve is new positions, typically.
Okay. Well, if you want to call it a new position because Joe over here is retiring.
Right, but if Joe's retiring and Fred's coming in on Joe's last day and taking over, that's really kind of a seamless transition.
There's gonna be a bump, but not.
Yeah, but it's if Fred's coming in early.
But you're not gonna hire anybody new to take care of somebody down the line.
I haven't heard any big requests like
That's
that.
what I'm talking about, just.
No. I haven't heard any requests like that.
I wouldn't like to see any new employees added until you have a much clearer picture on fire and police services. It just doesn't make good fiscal sense to me.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, honestly, the only one that I would even think of right now would be like a park ranger or something like that, but, we can discuss that. Not relevant at this point in time, but, if we look at our police and public safety services and how we deal with, issues that we face in the city consistently, having a police officer in a house or a parks ranger or something to that effect would definitely be useful, but we have to figure out what to do with our police contract first.
You know, we, whether we realize it or not, we have a very big job and a very tough job. Everybody brings us what they feel they need and want and what's gonna work best. And then we have to figure out, can we afford it? And if not, what can we afford and how do we go forward? That's our job. Anybody else? All right, with that, I'm gonna say thank you all so much for your time. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for being here and participating.
You want a motion to adjourn? Tammy, you want a motion to adjourn? I move we adjourn.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion, second to adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.